Captain Blake had it all: respect, authority, and a spotless record as a senior pilot. But on one ordinary flight, a single arrogant mistake would threaten everything he had built. When a high-profile first-class passenger greets him at the boarding gate, he chooses to ignore her, believing she doesn't belong among the elite. What he doesn't realize is that this woman holds more power than he could ever imagine, and she's about to turn his world upside down. As the flight takes off, whispers spread, a video goes viral, and an unexpected truth is revealed. When the plane lands, Blake finds himself face to face with the consequences of his actions. But instead of immediate punishment, he's given an ultimatum, one that will force him to see the world through the eyes of those he once dismissed. Will he rise to the challenge and prove he can change? Or is it too late to undo the damage he's done? Stick around until the end to see how this dramatic journey unfolds. And before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. The terminal was buzzing with the usual pre-flight chaos. Announcements crackled over the speakers, families rushed toward gates, and passengers shuffled in long security lines. Flight 176, a direct flight from New York to Los Angeles, was boarding its first-class passengers. Captain Blake stood near the cockpit entrance, greeting passengers as they entered. A polished figure in his crisp uniform, he exuded authority. His deep voice carried the rehearsed politeness of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "Welcome aboard." He nodded at an older gentleman in a suit. "Enjoy your flight." A warm smile for a young couple. Then came her. Monica Carter walked with effortless grace, her tailored black dress hugging her athletic frame. She had the air of someone used to being in control, unshaken, unfazed. But for Captain Blake, she was the wrong kind of first-class passenger. His smile faded. His nod was absent. And when Monica greeted him with a polite "Good evening, Captain," he didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, pretending to adjust the controls near the cockpit. A flight attendant, Lisa, standing nearby, noticed. Her brows furrowed. Monica, however, said nothing. She simply smirked, as if she had expected it. Lisa hesitated before leaning in. "Captain, did you just—" "It's nothing," Blake interrupted, waving her off. "Focus on the flight." But Lisa wasn't the only one who noticed. A man in seat 3A, a journalist, had recorded the entire exchange on his phone. He smirked as he tapped the screen. Upload. The first domino had fallen. Monica settled into her seat, placing her designer bag beside her. She could feel the eyes of other passengers on her, some whispering. But she remained calm, pulling out her phone and typing a brief message. "Stage 1. Let it begin." Lisa, now uneasy, approached her with a forced smile. "Can I get you anything, Miss Carter?" Monica looked up and studied the young woman for a moment. Then she chuckled softly. "No need to be nervous, Lisa. It's not you who made a mistake." Lisa blinked, flustered. I don't know what you mean." Monica leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "But you will." Lisa gulped, stepping back. The cabin doors closed. The flight was ready for takeoff. In the cockpit, Captain Blake checked his instruments, unaware that his world was about to shift dramatically. The engines roared as Flight 176 ascended into the evening sky. The city lights of New York shrank beneath them, fading into the endless darkness of the Atlantic night. Captain Blake leaned back in his seat, adjusting his headset. "All systems normal," his co-pilot, First Officer Reynolds, confirmed. Blake nodded, but barely listened. His mind was still on the woman in first class. Monica Carter. There was something about her, something that irritated him. He had spent his career working his way up, proving himself, earning the respect of his peers. And then people like her, people who didn't belong in first class, waltzed in as if they owned the place. He scoffed under his breath. He had seen it too many times. People who thought money could buy status. "She's not special," he muttered. "Sir?" Reynolds glanced over. "Nothing. Just keep an eye on turbulence reports." Back in first class, Monica sat comfortably, sipping a glass of sparkling water. The cabin was calm, the soft hum of the aircraft filling the space. But beneath that tranquility, something was shifting. A man across the aisle leaned toward her, lowering his voice. "Ms. Carter, I think you should see this." She raised a brow as he turned his phone screen toward her. It was a video the very moment Blake ignored her greeting. The footage was crisp, the angle perfect. The caption above it read, "First-class disrespect. Pilot refuses to acknowledge black businesswoman." It had been posted 20 minutes ago. It already had 12,000 views. Monica chuckled softly. That was fast. The man smirked. Social media works quicker than airplanes these days. Lisa, the flight attendant, passed by and caught a glimpse of the video. Her face paled. "Oh no!" Monica glanced up at her. Worried. Lisa hesitated, shifting on her feet. I just think Captain Blake wouldn't want this kind of attention." Monica leaned back, her fingers tapping the armrest. "Oh, I'm sure he wouldn't. But attention is a funny thing. It follows the truth." Lisa swallowed hard. She knew something was coming, but she couldn't tell whether it was justice or chaos. Then, a chime from the cockpit. "This is your captain speaking. We have reached our cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. Expected arrival time in Los Angeles is 10:15 p.m. We'll keep you updated on any changes. Thank you for flying with us." The intercom clicked off. Monica took her phone and sent another message. "Stage 2. Proceed." Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Blake's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was unusual. He rarely got personal notifications mid-flight. Frowning, he pulled it out. His screen was flooded with news alerts, tagged posts, and messages. His stomach twisted as he opened the first link. Trending number 3. Hashtag first-class disrespect. What the hell? He muttered, scrolling down. His face, his name, his exact actions were being discussed by thousands of people. Some were calling for his suspension. Others were demanding an apology. And then he saw the worst one, an official-looking account that had just posted. Breaking. Airline HQ is reviewing incident involving Captain Blake. More updates soon. His heart pounded. Reynolds glanced at him. "Sir? Everything okay?" Blake's grip tightened around his phone. He could feel the heat rising to his face. This was a joke, right? Some internet stunt? He had been a pilot for over 20 years. A single ignored greeting wouldn't. His thoughts froze when he saw the next message. A direct email from the CEO of the airline. "Captain Blake, we need to talk. Immediately." For the first time in years, Captain Blake felt turbulence inside himself. Captain Blake stared at his phone screen, his heart pounding against his ribs. The message from the CEO was short but carried a weight that sent a chill down his spine. "Captain Blake, we need to talk. Immediately." He clenched his jaw. This was spiraling out of control faster than he had expected. A single ignored greeting? That was nothing. Or at least it should have been. Reynolds noticed his captain's sudden silence. "Sir? You look pale." Blake exhaled sharply, locking his phone and shoving it into his pocket. "It's nothing. Focus on the instruments." But it wasn't nothing. He felt the cabin crew's eyes on him. He imagined whispers spreading among the passengers. Was Lisa talking? Was someone feeding information to the airline mid-flight? His hand twitched toward the intercom. Maybe a statement, some damage control. No. That would make it worse. He just had to ride this out, land the plane, and sort it out on the ground. Or so he thought. Back in first class, Monica sat with a knowing smirk as she watched the real turbulence begin, not in the sky, but inside the mind of Captain Blake. The man in seat 3A leaned over again. "You think he's seen it yet?" Monica chuckled. "Oh, he's seen it. And if he hasn't, he will soon." Lisa, now visibly nervous, approached cautiously. "Ms. Carter, I know this isn't my place, but are you going to report him?" Monica took a sip of her water before answering. "Lisa, tell me, if I had been someone else, do you think Captain Blake would have acted the same way?" Lisa hesitated. Then, she lowered her head. Monica sighed. That's what I thought. Lisa bit her lip. It's just, he's been with this airline for years. He's respected. Monica arched a brow. Respected by whom? Lisa had no answer. Monica leaned in slightly. Lisa, respect is earned. And a title doesn't erase someone's actions. If he thought treating me that way was acceptable, how many others has he done this to? Lisa swallowed hard. Just then, another ping from Monica's phone. She glanced at the screen and nodded. Stage 3. Ready? She turned back to Lisa. Don't worry. I don't believe in ruining people. I believe in teaching them a lesson. 30 minutes later, in the cockpit, Blake's worst fear materialized. The airline's emergency frequency crackled to life. This is HQ. Captain Blake, are you receiving? His throat went dry. That wasn't protocol. The airline never interrupted a flight unless there was a serious issue. He hesitated before pressing the intercom. This is Captain Blake. What's going on? A pause. Then, the voice returned firm, controlled, but unmistakably tense. We need you to confirm the presence of Monica Carter on Flight 176. Blake stiffened. His stomach dropped. Why? His voice came out sharper than he intended. The next sentence sent ice through his veins. She is not just a passenger. She is the new CEO of this airline. Silence. Blake felt the blood drain from his face. Reynolds stared at him, stunned. Sir, is that true? Blake's fingers trembled. He could barely hold the radio. You're telling me? He swallowed hard. You're telling me the woman in seat 2B is your boss, HQ confirmed. And she has requested to meet you upon landing. HQ suggests you prepare accordingly. Click. The line went dead. Blake couldn't breathe. Everything, the ignored greeting, the cold dismissal, the whispers, the viral video, it all came crashing down at once. He hadn't just slighted a passenger. He had slighted the most powerful woman in the airline. And now, she held his career in her hands. The cockpit was silent, except for the steady hum of the engines. Captain Blake's pulse pounded in his ears. He gripped the control column, his knuckles white. Monica Carter, the new CEO, the woman he had dismissed without a second thought. Blake's thoughts raced, trying to process the magnitude of his mistake. He had worked for this airline for over 20 years, climbing the ranks, gaining respect. Now, his entire career teetered on the edge of destruction, all because of one moment of arrogance. She set this up, he thought bitterly. She planned this. But deep down he knew better. She hadn't needed to set him up. He had walked straight into his own downfall. His co-pilot, Reynolds, cleared his throat. Sir, what do we do? Blake inhaled sharply. We land this plane. That's what we do. His voice was tight, forced. Nothing changes. We're professionals. But even as he said the words, he knew everything had changed. In first class, Monica Carter remained the picture of calm. The energy in the cabin had shifted. Passengers who had seen the viral video were now stealing glances at her, whispering. Lisa, the flight attendant, hovered nearby, her nervous energy practically vibrating. Through the air, Monica simply checked her watch. 30 minutes until landing. Lisa hesitated before stepping forward. Ms. Carter, Monica looked up, waiting. Lisa bit her lip. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For earlier. Monica studied her for a long moment. Then, she gave a small nod. It takes a lot to admit when something isn't right. Lisa exhaled, relieved. Do you think Captain Blake knows yet? Monica's lips curved into a knowing smile. Oh, he knows. Lisa hesitated again, shifting from foot to foot. Then, before she could lose the courage, she blurted out, Are you going to fire him? Monica tilted her head, as if considering the question. Then she asked, Do you think he deserves to be fired? Lisa opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know. He's a good pilot. Monica nodded. Good pilot. Bad judgment. Lisa didn't argue. Monica set down her glass. The real question is, having he learned anything? Lisa had no answer. And that, Monica knew, was the most dangerous kind of silence. The control tower radioed in. Flight 176, you are clear for landing. Wind conditions stable. Runway 22L is open. Blake responded automatically, his hand steady on the controls. But inside his mind was a storm. As the plane began its descent, he caught sight of the lights of LAX airport twinkling below. The city stretched out like a sea of gold beneath the night sky. But one thought loomed larger than everything else. Monica Carter was waiting for him. And this landing wouldn't just be about touching down safely. It would determine whether he would ever fly again. Lisa returned to Monica's seat. We'll be landing soon, Miss Carter. Do you need anything? Monica shook her head, standing up and adjusting her blazer. No, Lisa. But tell Captain Blake. She paused, then smirked. Actually, never mind. I'll tell him myself. Lisa nodded nervously and walked away. Monica turned to the man in seat 3A, the one who had posted the viral video. He was grinning. You planned this the whole time, didn't you? He asked. Monica raised a brow. I don't need to plan anything. She gathered her belongings. People reveal who they are when they think no one is watching. She glanced at her watch once more. 5 minutes to landing. Captain Blake's reckoning was about to begin. The descent was smooth, but inside the cockpit, Captain Blake felt like he was in freefall. His grip on the controls was firm, his training taking over, but his thoughts were in complete disarray. Monica Carter, the CO. How had he been so blind? How had he let his arrogance push him into this situation? He had spent years perfecting his reputation, ensuring his place at the top. Now it all came down to the next few minutes. Landing gear deployed, Reynolds reported. Blake forced himself to focus. Flaps set. Speed brakes armed. The runway lights stretched before them, the city of Los Angeles glowing beyond. But Blake wasn't thinking about the city. He was thinking about the meeting waiting for him the moment they landed. His career was on life support, and Monica Carter was holding the plug. In first class, Monica felt the familiar shift as the plane neared the ground. She braced slightly, but not because she was afraid. No, she was waiting. The man in seat 3A chuckled softly. You look like you're enjoying this. Monica smirked. I enjoy teachable moments. Lisa approached cautiously. Ms. Carter, she hesitated. Would you go easy on him? Monica arched a brow. You care about his job? Lisa bit her lip. I care about fairness. Monica considered that for a moment, then nodded. Fairness. A good concept. She glanced toward the cockpit door. Let's see if he's capable of it. The wheels of Flight 176 kissed the runway with precision. A textbook landing. Blake exhaled, but there was no relief. Only dread. He guided the plane down the taxiway as the control tower's voice crackled through the radio. Flight 176. Welcome to Los Angeles. Gate 14 is ready. Copy that. Blake responded automatically. But he barely heard himself, because standing just outside the terminal windows, waiting on the tarmac, was a group of executives in suits. And, at the front of the Monica Carter, his stomach twisted into knots. Reynolds saw them too. Sir, this doesn't look good. Blake tightened his jaw. I know. The plane rolled to a stop at the gate. The engines powered down. A deep silence filled the cockpit. Blake didn't move. Reynolds cleared his throat. Are you going to? Blake exhaled sharply and unbuckled his seatbelt. Let's get this over with. The first-class passengers disembarked first. Monica was among the last to leave. As she stepped out, Lisa watched her with a mix of admiration and apprehension. Good luck, Lisa murmured. Monica smiled. Luck has nothing to do with it. She walked through the jet bridge, her heels clicking against the floor, and emerged into the terminal. Captain Blake was already there. He stood stiffly, his uniform crisp, but there was a tension in his shoulders, the posture of a man awaiting judgment. The airline executives formed a semicircle behind Monica. Their expressions were unreadable. A long silence stretched between Monica and Blake. Then, Monica tilted her head slightly. "So, Captain, do you know why you're here?" Blake swallowed. He met her gaze, forcing himself to stand tall. "Because of a misunderstanding." Monica's lips twitched. "Misunderstanding?" Blake cleared his throat. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I treat all passengers professionally." Monica chuckled softly. "Do you?" Blake felt the weight of every pair of eyes on him. He had no good answer. Monica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Tell me, Captain, if I had been an older white man in a suit, would you have reacted the same way?" Blake froze. The silence stretched. For the first time he had no defense. And that, Monica knew, was the real moment of impact. The silence between them was suffocating. The terminal buzzed with passengers hurrying to their destinations. But in this small pocket of space, where Captain Blake stood before Monica Carter and the watching executives, the world felt frozen. Blake knew the answer to her question. Of course, he wouldn't have ignored an older, white man in a suit. He knew it. Monica knew it. And, judging by the look in the executives' eyes, they knew it too. But saying it out loud, admitting it, that would mean surrendering the last shred of control he had left. So he didn't. He straightened his spine. "I was focused on the flight preparations. It wasn't personal." Monica smiled, but not the kind that brought comfort. It was the kind that let him know she had already predicted his response. "Not personal," she repeated. "Interesting." She turned to the group of executives behind her. "Gentlemen, let's consider something." This man, Captain Blake, was so focused that he had time to greet multiple other passengers. But somehow, the one person he ignored was the black woman in first class. The executives exchanged glances. None of them spoke. Blake's throat went dry. He could feel the ground beneath him becoming unsteady, the walls closing in. Monica continued, her voice even. "It wasn't an accident. It wasn't focus. It was a choice." Blake's fists clenched. "That's not fair." Monica raised a brow. "Fair? You want to talk about fairness?" Blake swallowed. Monica folded her arms. "Let me ask you this, Captain, how many other times have you made that same choice? How many other passengers who didn't fit your expectations of first class have you dismissed just like that?" Blake opened his mouth, but he had no answer. Because the truth was, he had done it before. Maybe not always so obviously. Maybe just a glance, a hesitation, a moment of doubt in his mind about whether someone belonged in first class. It had been so subtle, so unquestioned, that he had never thought twice about it. Until now. Monica watched him carefully, letting the weight of his silence settle over the group. Then she sighed. "Captain Blake, let me be clear. I'm not here because of some internet outrage. I don't make decisions based on headlines. I make them based on what's right for this airline." Blake's pulse pounded. He knew what was coming next. Monica took a slow step forward. "So tell me, Captain, why should this airline keep someone in uniform who can't even treat its passengers with basic dignity?" His breath hitched. This was it. He had one chance to save himself. The executives shifted, waiting for his answer. The entire terminal felt like it had gone silent, the distant sounds of flight announcements and rolling suitcases fading away. Blake's mind raced. He had spent decades building his career. He had worked harder than most. But now, standing here, stripped of the authority his uniform once gave him, he saw himself the way Monica saw him, not as a respected captain, but as a man who had been given every privilege and still thought he was above accountability. The realization hit him harder than expected. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, Blake truly felt ashamed. His shoulders sagged slightly. He exhaled. I was wrong. His voice was quieter than before, but clear. The executives looked at him. Monica remained unreadable. Blake continued. I dismissed you because of who I assumed you were. I didn't think about it, I just reacted. He swallowed hard. And that's not the kind of leader I should be. For the first time, Monica's expression softened just slightly. Blake straightened, finally meeting her gaze. I can't undo what I did, but if there's a way to fix this to prove that I can change, I want that chance. The executives murmured among themselves. The tension shifted, the weight of finality still looming. Then Monica spoke. Good, she said simply, because I do believe in second chances. Blake's chest tightened. Was he actually getting one? But Monica's next words made it clear this wouldn't be easy. You'll find out the terms of that second chance soon, she said. Then, she turned and walked away. Blake exhaled, but his relief was short-lived. Because he knew one thing for certain, whatever was coming next would be the hardest test of his life. Captain Blake stood frozen as Monica Carter disappeared down the terminal, leaving him in uncertain limbo. The executives behind him murmured in hushed voices, but their judgmental stares were unmistakable. He had expected immediate termination. Instead, he had been given a second chance, but on her terms. And that terrified him more than being fired. A throat cleared behind him. One of the senior executives, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward. Captain Blake, he said, his voice cool, professional. We just received the formal decision from Ms. Carter. Effective immediately, you are grounded from flight duty. Blake winced but nodded. He had seen it coming. Another executive, a woman with dark-rimmed glasses, continued. Your status as a senior pilot will be under review. However, per the CEO's directive, you will not be dismissed outright. Blake's breath hitched. There it was, the second chance. But, she added sharply, there are conditions. Blake straightened. What conditions? The man with silver hair smirked. You're about to find out. The next morning, Blake arrived at the airline's corporate headquarters, a towering glass building that seemed far removed from the cockpits he was used to. A receptionist directed him to a conference room. When he entered, Monica Carter was already there, seated at the head of the table, reviewing a folder. She barely acknowledged him. Take a seat, Captain. Blake obeyed, clasping his hands together. Monica slid a document across the table toward him. Here are your options. Blake picked up the paper, scanning the contents. His stomach dropped. Option 1. Immediate resignation. No pension. No severance. Blake swallowed hard. That was as good as being erased. He moved to option 2, and his brows furrowed in confusion. Mandatory training in the airline's equity and inclusion program. Full completion required before reinstatement consideration. Blake looked up. You want me to take a diversity course? Monica's lips curled into a half smirk. Oh no, Captain. I don't want you to just take a course. I want you to experience it. Blake frowned. What does that mean? Monica leaned forward slightly. You'll go through our full equity training, but from the perspective of the people you once dismissed. Blake stiffened. You'll work shifts in customer service, assist flight attendants, attend passenger complaint hearings. See what it's like to be treated the way you treated others, she said, folding her hands. Blake exhaled sharply. You want to humiliate me? Monica's eyes narrowed. No, Captain. I want you to learn. If you think this is about humiliation, you've already missed the point. Blake clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, but deep down he knew this was fair. He had spent years in a position of power, never once considering what it was like to be on the other side. Monica tilted her head. If you complete the program and show genuine change, we'll consider reinstating you. If you fail or refuse, you're done. Blake let out a slow breath. He could walk away, resign, but that would mean admitting defeat, losing everything. Or he could take this path, the hard path, and prove that he was more than his worst moment. He met Monica's gaze. "I'll do it." For the first time, she smiled just a little. "Good," she said. "Let's see what you're really made of, Captain." Captain Blake had spent his entire career in the cockpit, where he was in control. Now, for the first time in decades, he was grounded not because of a storm or technical failure, but because of his own actions. And now, his first assignment was waiting for him at Gate 22 of LAX. Blake sighed, adjusting the airline-issued vest over his uniform. It felt wrong, unnatural to be in this position. Flight attendants and ground staff bustled around him, preparing for the next departure. He had never paid much attention to them before. They were just part of the background. Now, they were his co-workers. Lisa, the flight attendant from his ill-fated flight, approached with a clipboard. She was his supervisor for the day. Her smirk was barely contained. "Welcome to the wonderful world of customer service, Captain." Blake folded his arms. "Let's just get this over with." Lisa chuckled. "Oh, no, no. We savor this." She handed him a tablet. "Your first task, assist passengers boarding Flight 347 to Dallas. Check tickets, answer questions, smile." Blake's jaw tightened. Smile? Lisa must have sensed his resistance. She leaned in. "Hey, you could have walked away. But you didn't. So, let's see what you've got." Blake exhaled, then turned toward the incoming passengers. And immediately he felt the shift. People ignored him, walking past, without acknowledging him. Some didn't make eye contact, treating him like he was just another nameless airline worker. A few spoke to him curtly, barely looking up from their phones. It was subtle but painfully familiar. This is how he had treated Monica Carter. Dismissively, casually, like she wasn't worth a second thought. And now, he was on the receiving end. 2 hours later, Blake's patience was wearing thin. He had been snapped at, ignored, and forced to answer the same dumb questions over and over again. "When are we boarding? Why is my seat in the back? Can you upgrade me?" By the time a businessman in an expensive suit approached, Blake was on edge. "Excuse me," the man said, waving a platinum membership card. "I should have been given priority boarding." Blake forced a polite tone. "Sir, this flight doesn't have priority seating." The man scoffed. "Ridiculous. I always fly first class. You should know that." Blake stiffened. That tone, that expectation. It was his own voice, coming from someone else. This was how he had treated Monica. The realization hit like turbulence. Blake forced himself to breathe, keeping his frustration in check. "I apologize, sir, but the seating arrangement is fixed." The man scowled, but walked away. Lisa, who had been watching, raised an eyebrow. "Getting the picture yet?" Blake hesitated. "I never thought much about this." Lisa smirked. "That's the point." Blake glanced at the passengers, the families, the young professionals, the elderly travelers, all moving with their own worries, their own lives. For the first time, he saw them differently. They weren't just people he transported from city to city. They were human beings. And the way he treated them? It mattered. Lisa nudged him. "Shift's not over, Captain. You ready for round 2? Blake straightened. For the first time since this started, he wasn't dreading it. "Yeah," he said. "Let's do this." The second half of Blake's shift was even more eye-opening than the first. He had spent years flying thousands of passengers across the world, but today, for the first time, he was truly seeing them. Lisa led him through the next phase of his training, handling customer complaints. "You want a real challenge?" she said, handing him a headset. "Welcome to the airline's complaints desk. Buckle up." Blake hesitated before putting it on. He had always hated this part of the job, hearing about passenger frustrations, most of which he assumed were exaggerated or unnecessary. But now, he had to listen. The first call came through. A woman's voice, tense. "I was promised a vegetarian meal, and there was nothing available on my flight." Blake straightened. "I understand, ma'am. That must have been frustrating." A pause. Then a sharp, "You're the first person to say that. Everyone else just told me it wasn't their problem." Blake felt a pang of guilt. That had been his mindset too if it wasn't directly affecting him. It wasn't his concern. "Well," he said carefully, "it is our problem. Let me see what I can do." By the time he finished arranging compensation for the woman, her tone had softened. "Thank you," she said. "I just wanted someone to acknowledge it." Acknowledgement, something so simple, yet so rare. The next call was worse. A man, furious. "Your crew treated me like I didn't belong in first class. They ignored me while serving drinks." Blake froze. That was exactly what he had done to Monica Carter. His grip on the headset tightened. "Sir, I want to sincerely apologize. That is not how any passenger should be treated." The man's anger didn't vanish, but it lessened. It's humiliating, you know?" Blake swallowed hard. "Yeah," he admitted. "I do." Lisa, standing nearby, gave him a knowing look. Blake ended the call and removed the headset, exhaling. Lisa smirked. "So, Captain, still think passengers complain over nothing?" Blake ran a hand over his face. "No," he muttered. "I don't." After hours at the desk, Blake was exhausted. But the final part of his training was still waiting. Lisa handed him a different uniform. Not a pilot's uniform. Not even a gate agent's. A flight attendant's uniform. Blake stared at it. "You're joking." Lisa grinned. "Nope. Monica wants you to experience everything." Blake hesitated, then sighed. "Fine." Minutes later, he found himself inside a training cabin, surrounded by actual flight attendants. One of them, a young woman named Tasha, crossed her arms. "All right, Captain. Since you think this job is so easy, let's see you handle a beverage cart during turbulence." Before Blake could react, the simulation began. The entire training room lurched fake, but realistic. The cart tilted, and Blake scrambled to steady it. Drinks spilled. Cups toppled. Laughter erupted from the flight attendants. Lisa smirked. "Yeah, you're natural." Blake scowled, but kept going. He wouldn't let them see him fail. By the end of the exercise, he was sweating out of breath and for the first time truly respected the job these people did. He had been so blind. But now, he was starting to see. Lisa clapped him on the back. "You're learning, Captain." Blake let out a tired chuckle. Yeah, but he knew the real test was still ahead. Because tomorrow, he had a meeting with Monica Carter, and she would decide if he had truly changed or if his career was over. Captain Blake had faced countless difficult landings in his career: storms, mechanical failures, emergency situations. But nothing had ever felt quite like this moment. Dressed in his full pilot's uniform, he stood outside Monica Carter's office, his palms slightly damp. He had spent a week in training, experiencing every aspect of the airline from a perspective he had never considered before. And now he would find out if any of it had been enough. A receptionist gestured toward the door. "She's ready for you." Blake took a steadying breath and stepped inside. Monica Carter sat behind a sleek glass desk, flipping through a file. She didn't acknowledge him right away. Blake cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter." Monica finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "Captain Blake." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." He obeyed, feeling like a rookie pilot facing an instructor after a disastrous test flight. Monica closed the file and folded her hands on top of it. "So, 1 week in training. 1 week of customer service, complaint management, and flight attendant duties. Tell me, Captain, what did you learn?" Blake chose his words carefully. "I learned that I had been blind," he admitted. "I saw passengers as part of my job, not as individuals. I dismissed their concerns, and I never really considered what the crew went through outside of my cockpit." Monica's expression remained neutral. "And," Blake exhaled, "and I was wrong about all of it." For the first time, Monica leaned back slightly, watching him. "Go on." Blake ran a hand over his face. I used to think respect was about rank, about what you've earned through years of experience. But this past week, I saw what real respect looks like. He met her gaze. It's how you treat people, especially when no one's watching. Monica let the silence settle between them. Then she tilted her head. Why didn't you quit? Blake hesitated. He had thought about it more than once. I guess I didn't want my legacy to end that way, he admitted. I wanted to prove to myself that I could be better. Monica studied him for a long moment. Then she slid the file across the table. Blake glanced down and saw his own name on the top page. His official evaluation. He held his breath as she spoke. I spoke to Lisa. I spoke to the customer service team. I even spoke to passengers from your training flights. Monica's voice was steady, measured. They all said the same thing. Blake braced himself. They saw change, she said simply. Blake's stomach unclenched slightly, but he didn't dare relax. Monica tapped the folder. That doesn't mean you're off the hook. You don't get a free pass because you had one good week. Blake nodded, fully expecting that. I understand. Monica studied him one last time before making her final call. Effective immediately, she said, your suspension is lifted. But you'll remain under probation for the next 6 months. One misstep, and you're done. Blake exhaled sharply, part relief, part realization. She was giving him a chance, but it was up to him to keep it. Monica leaned forward slightly. Make no mistake, Captain. This airline doesn't need pilots who just fly planes. We need leaders, people who represent what this company stands for. Blake straightened his posture. I won't let you down. Monica's lips twitched into the smallest of smirks. See that you don't. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Blake rose as well, but before he left, he hesitated at the door. He turned back. Monica, thank you. Monica simply nodded. Safe flights, Captain. As he stepped out of her office, Blake felt something strange, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief. A chance to be better. And this time, he wouldn't waste it. This story wasn't just about a flight, it was about change, accountability, and the power of second chances. Captain Blake thought he had it all figured out, but life had a way of humbling him. Respect isn't about rank or years of experience. It's about how you treat people, especially when no one's watching. What do you think? Did Captain Blake truly learn his lesson? Would you have given him a second chance, or should he have been fired? Let us know in the comments. And before you go, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next video.